Rugby is the most injurious sport that's commonly played in school systems.
Tackling in rugby, it's part of the game. You can't not tackle with rugby.
This is a real problem, and they can ignore it as much as they want, but actually all they're doing is digging themselves into a bigger hole.
2 hands, Josh!
The petition was there to scaremonger for me personally, and I think that's wrong.
Rugby, a contact sport at its heart, but when it comes to our children, should we be using our heads? A group of 70 medical experts, academics and public health professionals have sent an open letter to members of the government requesting a ban on compulsory tackling in rugby for school children. They say that the level and severity of rugby injuries compared to other sports in the school curriculum is alarming and something needs to change. The response to this petition has been extreme and at times even abusive. I want to find out why there has been such a backlash to this petition. Are their facts true? Is the rugby world hiding something? Should tackling be removed from the game? Nathan Cubitt was 16 years old when he broke his neck in a rugby game. Nathan is now a quadriplegic, paralysed from the arms down.
It was playing under 16s, obviously. It was 5 minutes into the match. It was the second scrum of the match. I wasn't comfortable in the scrum. It was my fault. I should have said I wasn't comfortable, so I should have got up and not. But I carried on, and the scrum collapsed, and the opposition hesitated in the engagement. So when we went to clash towards them, they wasn't there to catch us, and we just went straight down and fractured and dislocated my C5 and C6 in my spinal cord.
The accident has changed Nathan's life and his family's lives beyond measure. His sister Naomi changed professions because of Nathan's injury, and his 17-year-old brother can put in a catheter faster than a nurse.
Is there anything you do in the house, like day-to-day?
I don't really do, no. No. I ain't got my corset on, I'm not comfortable without my corset on.
Avoiding injuries like Nathan's is a reason for this petition. But to better understand the other reasons, I went to speak to one of the people that initiated it, Professor Eric Anderson.
The reason is children across the United Kingdom are compelled by institutional decree to play rugby, tackle rugby against their will. And at the same time, we know that there's a host of injuries that come from rugby, both in terms of musculoskeletal injuries, bone injuries, nerve damage, but most worryingly is a very high rate of concussion. This petition is particularly about rugby because rugby is one of the most dangerous sports that is commonly played with a high yield of brain trauma. What we are learning now is that the long-term impacts of repeated collisions, with or without concussion, has dire consequences on a large number of people who play contact sports. I'm not willing to have British school children be the subjects for that experiment. Research on rugby players, research on football players, research on people who've had repeated blows to the head. The long-term prognosis is not looking good. It's one sport that you can easily change the structure of to remedy the situation. All we have to do is take the tackle out of rugby and replace it with tag.
So what do you think about the petition to end tackling in schools?
To me, it'll ruin rugby. School rugby is where you start your love for rugby, where you learn your essential techniques, and then obviously you get more into it, and then you go into clubs. Cancelling tackling in rugby in schools, it'll just ruin everything for rugby in general.
Is there any part of your all that resents the game at all?
No. Rugby's been my life. I've played it since I can remember. I've always done it. I've always had it in my life. My uncle taught me how to play rugby and tackling and scrummaging. And my cousin does it. My other cousin used to do it. My brother used to do it. But he's stopped now since my injury. But I'd never stop. If I could do it again, I would.
Despite his life-changing injury, Nathan does not think stopping tackling is the answer, and he is not alone. The rugby community has largely condemned the petition. Johnny Cross is a PE teacher from Congleton High School in Manchester. He ensures that rugby is still a compulsory part of his curriculum.
It's a generalisation just to say that only rugby union has got the issues. I think it's the way it's delivered in schools as well as in rugby clubs is the important thing to focus on, rather than the petition itself. The petition just highlighted what the RFU are doing. I thought it was positive. Well, ultimately, if you took tackling out of schools, then students would miss out, girls and boys would miss out on the opportunity, because that's sometimes where they first find it. They're at that stage where they're developing those skills, and if they miss out that opportunity, then ultimately there's going to be a potential high-risk issue if they decide at 16 they want to start playing the full 15-a-side contact game.
I think if a child doesn't want to play rugby, they should ever be made to as part of kind of school curriculum.
I personally, and I run the curriculum at my school, think that it's a really valid contribution to the wider aspect of sport. So I personally make it compulsory, but the variations of the game within that, 100% of the boys that participate and the girls that participate really thoroughly enjoy it.
Sit!
As a part of the rugby community, Johnny's support of tackling is expected. But when those involved in rugby voice a different opinion, the backlash becomes personal. Adam White is an executive committee member of England Rugby Schools. He works within the RFU, but on the issue of tackling in schools, Adam is taking a stand against them.
Members of the organisation were dismissing the evidence. They were not listening to the scientific proof that was out there, and actually they were trying to cover up with good news what was actually quite a serious matter.
There's also been suggestions that if children are not taught how to correctly tackle while they're young and then they go on to play it later, that will be more dangerous. So
yeah, of course there's going to be that suggestion, but for me that's focusing on the sport and the tackle. I'm more interested in children's health, and that's the important thing for me. Part of what we're asking is the ban in schools and not in club rugby. So by focusing on children later on in life, that's suggesting that they're going to want to go on and play rugby, and everybody will want to go on and play rugby afterwards, so potentially could be injured. For me, we need to keep children safe and actually focus on the children's needs, not the game's needs.
Adam is not just concerned about tackling, he is also worried about the teaching of tackling. And this is one of the biggest points of contention between the two sides.
We're already seeing that only 38% of staff in physical education have any rugby training in terms of delivery of contact rugby.
Well, the RFU have put in place around the country, north, south, east and west, community rugby coaches who offer Rugby Ready Scrum Factory, which is the most important thing that any coach could do, the Scrum Factory course, which is designed for developing the Tower of Power body position, which is great for tackling on all contact situations. They've put that in place. It's for the schools to access it.
In terms of internationally, we are probably the worst rugby union.
The RFU are doing all that they can.
But what does the RFU itself say? Jonathan Webb, a former England international who now chairs medical advisory committees for the RFU, has a different perspective on how the union is tackling the topic.
We want a discussion about this. There's no question we're trying to hide or disclose information that's incorrect, and I just felt that this petition wasn't terribly helpful. It was quite emotive, it was quite in a way deceptive, because it was trying to come across as a really powerful academic piece, whereas in fact the vast majority of signatories on there really have nothing to do with concussion or tackling. But what we're doing is now analysing all the tackles, for example, that produced concussion, and then trying to compare that to tackles that didn't result in a concussion, to try and see what are the common factors that were present in that, because eventually there may need to be some rule changes.
But the petitioners feel that something needs to be done now. They say that when it comes to protocol, the RFU and the other unions are reactive rather than proactive. New initiatives like the Recognise and Remove response in Ireland, which ensures that children are removed from play at the first sign of injury, were introduced in response to a recognised problem. The Recognise and Remove response was started because of a number of campaigns to raise concussion awareness following the tragic death of a schoolboy in Northern Ireland. His name was Benjamin Robinson and he was 14 years old. Ben's mother Karen is one of these campaigners, and although she does not feel comfortable speaking about what happened on camera, she gave me permission to tell his story to help make sure that he is the last child that suffers. Ben was playing for his school in the second round of the Ulster Under-15s competition when he was knocked to the ground. Minutes after getting help to his feet, he was locked in a clash of heads. Ben was checked for concussion 3 times throughout the match, but after each test, he was deemed able to play on. Minutes before the final whistle, he fell again. Ben later died from second impact syndrome. Fortunately, Ben's case is quite a rare one, but I still wanted to find out more about second impact syndrome and what it could mean for other young rugby players.
So there's a phenomenon called second impact syndrome, which relates to having a second injury a period of time after a first injury, and the effects of that injury are perceived to be much worse than would be expected from the mechanism. So relatively minor fall or relatively minor tackle, and the patient may have severe brain injury or die from that.
Because a lot of the people we've spoken to have had memory loss when they've had a concussion. What area would that affect in the brain?
When people are concussed, no one really knows what causes concussion. It's thought to be a shaking phenomenon of the brain, and it may be affecting particular areas. People think it may be particularly affecting the brain stem, but actually when you do an MR scan of people who have been concussed repeatedly, you often find little microhemorrhages in the areas that connect different parts of the brain to other parts of the brain.
Bertie Nicholson has suffered from 2 serious concussions in rugby. He is also just 14 years old. His head injuries, however, have not diminished his love of the game.
I found it was really weird walking because I couldn't really walk in a straight line, and I got dizzy and felt sick a lot and it turned out I can't watch action films, which was pretty annoying. In the first case, it was my teacher said I wasn't allowed to play for 2 weeks, which I thought was stupidly unfair. But now I know he was kind of looking out for me. The first time it kind of put me off a bit, but then I kind of kept going and enjoyed it again. And this time I don't think it's going to do a lot because I have no memory of it.
I think if you've got small boys, all they want to do is contact rugby, and if you took tackling out, they would just think it was a waste of time. I wasn't sure about whether I wanted them to play it, and perhaps with hindsight I might have guided them a bit more towards hockey, but that's my own anxieties. They've enjoyed rugby and loved it. The children who really hate it just don't tackle, and you see them on the pitch and they run up and down and they don't tackle, and that's okay.
And when they do get injured, do you think the school or the club deals with it in the correct way?
Yeah, incredibly effectively, and the whole head aware stuff is really noticeable now, and it's been really noticeable in the time that they've been doing it, how much more understanding there is about concussion, and school taking responsibility that children can't play if they've been concussed, rather than leaving it for the child to feel better. So that's made a big difference.
The petition was written largely due to injuries like Bertie's. The letter emphasises the dangers of concussion and its growing place in schools rugby as the principal reason behind their appeal. They have cited studies that show that the risk of concussion for a child or adolescent player over a season is 11%. That is the equivalent of 1 or 2 players sustaining a concussion in every 15-player team, and that tackling was responsible for 87% of these concussions. However, the effects of concussion are more difficult to quantify. Mark Wilson explained that concussions are hard to diagnose, and even the experts don't fully understand the effects it has on the brain, and in many cases what happens can seem contradictory.
I think that if you are playing a sport where you get concussed regularly and you're becoming more aware of it, then yes, there probably is a multiple toll that occurs. But you can't really say that that because you've had one concussion, the next will be worse than one. That would be really terrible. I don't think that's how it works.
This difference between cases is highlighted with Connor Turner, a medical student whose multiple head injuries from rugby do seem to have been aggravated with each trauma, and his latest concussion may even stop him from playing altogether.
Well, I had my last concussion in January, and since then, that one sort of hit me the hardest, but I think I've been told that this is how it works, that every subsequent concussion you get, it seems to last longer or be worse. So this one did affect me, sort of headaches and a few memory issues for quite some time. And I never intended to play rugby particularly seriously. I did it for fun, and I've done it for a long time. but I think I might be ready to bow out now. To be honest, I think in general, I don't think I've been particularly managed well with my concussions. I think that the teachers and the people around me didn't know a huge amount. I would go to a hospital, but very few people know, I think, a lot about concussions. I've recently spoken to someone who's a real specialist and expert in the field, and he was great and he told me everything. But before that, I don't think the education on concussion is particularly good at all.
Well, concussion is not a great term for describing the type of brain injury. What the public and what most people tend to understand is that it's a shaking of the brain that then results in longer, like ongoing symptoms of a few days or a few weeks. That's what most people understand about concussion.
There is no one consensus on concussion, and herein lies the essential problem between the health professionals and the players. Without a clear understanding of head injuries and its effects, one side prefers to look to the future, whilst the other is more focused on the now. The protocol around concussion in rugby is not just a contentious topic when it comes to schools. The professional game has come under scrutiny in the last year, largely because of the controversy surrounding Welsh international George North's repeated knockouts.
George North looks in big trouble. I think George North has taken a boot to the head there.
I would expect him to at least have a proper examination.
One of the arguments against the petition has claimed that if you remove tackling from schools level rugby, it could make the professional game more dangerous. The number of concussions like North's could increase if correct tackling techniques are not taught at a young age. Mark Hanslip was the England under-16s coach and has first-hand experience of the development pathway from schools rugby to the professional game. I wanted to hear what his opinions on the petition were.
It's an interesting one because the game is fundamentally contact-based, and therefore if you remove the element of tackling, you probably have to remove several other elements of the game, such as a line-out or a scrum.
It depends how much tackling is seen as an integral part of the game. I mean, it's fundamentally the game is still about scoring tries and gaining points and winning the game, and obviously tackling is an element of defence that stops that from occurring. I suspect the RFU recognise the fact that they have to upskill coaches to make it safer, and that certainly in a school like ours it's more of a priority now than the win-loss ratio.
So do you think children will be attracted to rugby if you take the contact aspect out of it?
I think in the modern day they will lose interest over a short period of time. However, the cognitive and physical skills required to outwit an opponent, a 2-on-1 in football, rugby, hockey, netball, they're all essentially the same, and they'll get a great sense of satisfaction still from beating an opponent.
Mark may not think that removing tackling will necessarily affect the game, but Saracens rugby player Scott Sperling puts his professional career down to the skills he learnt when he was at school.
Just running through people and hitting people is kind of why everyone loves rugby, because it's just to get to smash people legally, and it's fun when you're a kid. You just want to run around and hit people and get in, not fights, but just get a bit rowdy and stuff. So that was the attraction, but it was mandatory at school, so that's why you did it, because I was good. That's why I played more.
And do you think, had there been an option where you could play tag rugby or tackle rugby, you would have chosen tag?
No, I wouldn't. No, that would have been the worst option. That's why it's not an option. I think you get choices, but if you really badly don't want to play, I don't think you have to. I got scouted by academy when I was 13 before I played club, and then because I was I'm pretty good at this, so I started playing club rugby, and that's when I started thinking, I could actually do this professionally.
And where were you playing at school when you were scouted?
Yes, it was a school game. So scouts go around. I think it was a county coach who knew an academy coach told him to come watch me, and then went on from there. If I wasn't at school, I would have had no opportunities to be where I am at today, rugby-wise.
Scott was lucky enough to attend a traditionally rugby-oriented school where the coaching was at a technically sound and safe level. But if coaches have not been taught sufficiently, the dangers for children can be significant, and it is this that other professional players are looking to rectify.
If you try and throw somebody into a situation they're not used to that situation before they're ready, like I say, that could be dangerous for them. So I think it's starting at the very basic level and building that up. If you've not tackled properly until you're sort of at senior age, you're you're up against it straight away, and there's potential for further injury or even serious injury.
Lewis retired from professional rugby in February 2015. He now works full-time for the Matt Hampson Foundation. Matt Hampson is famous throughout the sporting world for turning a life-threatening injury into something positive. His support has helped hundreds of injured players in different sports to help make their lives better, and he does it all from this foundation here in Leicester.
I think as a professional rugby player you feel there's this sort of air of invincibility, and you feel that you're invincible, and rightly so. You have to sort of go into the game like that or you will get injured. I had my accident about 11 years ago now, playing for England in the 21s. I was in a collapsed scrum, the scrum collapsed and I took the weight of both packs on the back of my neck, and I was left paralysed from the neck down, unable to breathe out the aid of a ventilator.
What was your initial reaction to this petition to end compulsory tackling in schools?
I thought it was ridiculous. I'm all for the sort of physicality around the sport of rugby, and I just think it'd be a crying shame if rugby didn't sort of carry on with the physicality. If kids get taught the correct techniques around tackling and the sort of physical aspect of the game, then it'll be a lot better. I think the RFU have got the right protocols in place now. Initially, when I first had my accident, they did really struggle to come to terms with it and almost wanted to brush my accident under the carpet and didn't want to take responsibility for it.
Whilst Matt is critical of how the RFU acted following his injury, he does not blame them for his accident. It was just that, an accident. He doesn't blame the RFU any more than he blames the physicality of the game for what happened. Like Nathan, Matt is still an advocate for contact rugby. For him, the petition's aim to end tackling is not the answer. The original intention of the petition was to lobby the government for change. When I contacted the Education Minister, Nicky Morgan, she declined my offer of an interview. But she gave me the same statement that she had to the petitioners, that rugby plays an important role in developing character and that the department will continue to give schools flexibility when it comes to the PE curriculum. In short, the petition's request was denied. But their efforts have not been totally in vain. They have raised awareness around the issue, and it is clear that something still needs to be changed.
It's educationally unsound to have an 85 kilogram boy playing rugby against a 55 kilogram boy.
On the first time I went for a tackle because they had a rather big guy and we were near our line, so I just had to go in and not let him run over me.
And you also have 102-pound Johnny lined up against 205-pound Freddie, and because they're in the same grade, the same year in school, they collide.
Yeah, I feel confident, just that I don't feel confident like when I'm up against like big boys. Yeah, but I do feel confident. Yeah, I definitely.
And do you often have to play against people that are bigger than you?
Definitely. I'm quite twitchy.
When I was at school, I was one of the smallest, and you have like people twice your size running at you is a bit daunting. And I think the way the New Zealanders do it, they weight categorise it, which could be an option.
Weight-band rugby categorises children by size and weight rather than age, and Wellington School in Somerset is the first school to bring this initiative to the UK. I'm driving down to speak to their Director of Sport to see if this is a safer alternative.
We don't want to ban tackling, we don't want touch rugby, but by doing something that's quite simple, I think will make it safer, but there will be injuries. It is inevitable, but if we as coaches can make sure the technique of tackling is perfect and to even the sizes up, then it's going to help it in the long run. Being here for 5 years now, I've just seen that the discrepancy between the big lads and the small lads, really. It's just a mismatch, and it's not games are decided on the size and the maturation rates of individuals. So then it takes away from the game, and it's also not safe. So I've brought this initiative in.
The problem is that you can get children who emotionally and mentally are still 13, even if their body is that of a 17-year-old, and then pitting them against other 17-year-olds who may be the same size isn't quite as straightforward.
The important thing to mention is that this is for 13, 14, 15-year-olds in that maturation stages where peak velocity. That's where it's important. That's where the maturation rates are so different. After that, then it becomes back to performance playing. So after 16, you then go back, and if you're smaller, then you play in a different position or whatever. But it's in that middle band that it's all about, and they train together anyway. I can't see any negatives to it, if I'm honest.
So where does rugby stand now? There has been progression in terms of safety procedures. Matt said that the RFU have improved their attitude since he was injured, and we can see this with Nathan's injury 5 years later. And it is the same thing with Connor and Bertie. Whilst Connor thinks his school was ill-prepared for his concussion, Bertie believes his school did everything by the book. There is still a long way to go in terms of making rugby as safe as it can be, but this progression has shown that the RFU is on the right track, and weight-band rugby may be the next step on this path. The petition was unable to change the status quo. Compulsory rugby will remain on the school's curriculum, but they did succeed in opening up the debate, and with it, they have sped up rugby's march towards a safer game.
If the little kids want to play and they still want to tackle, you can't take that away from them.
It was just a freak accident, and it was obviously unfortunate. Changed my life forever.
Always quite relieved when the match has come to an end.
So basically, you got to kind of be brave to tackle it.
No, I don't regret it. Rugby was my life. I will always love rugby, and if I could do it again, I would.